In today's episode, we're going to carry on working on Geometry Dash. So yesterday we tried to start the game, but nothing was going right because there was no autocomplete in our IDE editor, so things were not working. So today I managed to fix everything yesterday. So we got our editor working. I've switched over to, what's it called? Which one am I using? I am using JetBrains Rider. It's a free trial for 30 days, so we'll see how that goes. So it seems to be really good so far. So got our autocomplete back, so we'll see how far we can get in today's episode. So today we are going to focus on 3 things, I think. The first one is completing the movement of our player. So we want the player, let's jump into it here quick so I can show you. We want our player, which is this guy here, our cube, to be able to move from off the screen over here to in this direction. And then what we also want to do is we want to enable our player to be able to jump. So eventually you'll be able to jump over obstacles. Now you'll only be able to jump when you're grounded, so we need to go and add in that check. I don't think we'll do that in today's episode, but we will implement the jumping feature. The next thing we need to do is we need to, what do we need to do? We need to actually finish the movement of the player because I think we didn't get it working in yesterday's episode. So we'll go and make that a constant movement. So the player, there will be a button in the middle of the screen that says, like it will be like a play button. As soon as you press that, then the player is off. The player will start moving from left to right in the right direction, so towards the side of the screen, and then that's just going to continuously move until you hit an obstacle you're not supposed to hit, and then it'll stop the game, and then you'll have the option to start again. So once we've done that, we need to then go and work on the camera movement. So what we want the camera to do is we want the camera to start off, or we want the scene to start off like this. Ignore the ground for now, that will change. That's just there to stop our cube from falling down. So what we want to do, the aim of the game is to have our player move from the off of the screen, which is somewhere over here. You can't really see it. But what we wanted to do is we want the camera to then wait for the player to move somewhere over here in the middle of the screen, and then as soon as the player gets to this point, that is when the camera is going to trigger the follow script that we will create. So that is then going to follow the player, and then pretty much the only thing that you'll see from this point is you jumping up like this. So you'll jump up over an obstacle, and then depending on what it is, you'll keep jumping up and down. Well, you can't really jump down, but that is the aim of today's episode. So let's get stuck into it. So let's work on the cube movement of our player. So I have done research into this, and I actually have planned this episode, so it should be fairly quick. So let me know if you like it the way we're going to do today. So I've done all the planning for this episode, so I know all the code that we're supposed to write and then all of that. So we're just going to go and do it, and then it should work, hopefully. You never know. So let's go to our script. So where's our script? Here's our player script. We're going to start in the player script. So let's go and add some movement to our player. So what we're going to need here is we are going to need a speed for our player. So let's go and say private, what's this going to be? Private const, because it's not going to change. Constant, then it's going to be you can make it an integer, but we'll make it a float just in case we change it later. We might have to increase or decrease it to a decimal point, but for now we'll just set that equal to 8. So speed is going to be, we'll set that equal to 8 for now, and then I think that's pretty much it, the only thing we need. So in our update method here, we can just go and say transform.translate. And then, well, I don't know why it puts 2 brackets. We've gone from yesterday not having any autocomplete in, Visual Studio, and today's episode we have, in what I think, in my own opinion, is way too much autocomplete. So you'll see if you use this editor, you'll see, well, you probably know what I'm talking about. So this is going to be like all of this. Why is this all here? I don't like this. This is too much. This is going to be a vector 2, so we're going to times our speed by time dot delta time. So that's going to be on the x-axis, and then we don't want any movement yet on our y-axis, so we can just go and say 0. So that should be fine. So we'll save that and let's go and test it out. So we don't need to add any trigger to this because we want our cube to constantly move while the game is running. So we're not going to add any we're not going to listen for any input to tell our player to stop moving. So let's go play the game. Hopefully we can see our player move. So there is our player. Now that's just going to move continuously forever until it gets to this point, and then it's going to fall down. But yeah, that's what we want our player to do. So depending on our jumping and the game mechanics of this game, we might have to change the speed of it. So let's now jump. Actually, should we do this? Let's go and add a menu. So this is the part I did not plan. So let's go and add a canvas quickly because I want it to I only want the player to move when we have pressed play. So let's go and say canvas. And then on this canvas, we can go and add a button. Can we? Okay, so we might have to just download these quick. Package manager. I can't remember what it's called. UI. Is that what it's called? UI. Unity UI. No. Button. Maybe, let's see, canvas, UI, image raw. Am I missing something? Scroll bar. (2D) object. Okay, let's just go look at this up quickly because this shouldn't take long. I have planned everything else, but let's go and do this quick. So the camera movement is not that complicated that we have to do. All we have to do is say, in an if statement, we'll just say that when the player, which I think is, where is it? When our player reaches the middle of the screen, which is probably about, we're going to set it to 0 because our player should be at 0. So when it gets to an X value of 0, then we go and trigger the camera to stop moving. So that is what we're going to do as soon as we figure out how to get buttons. Okay, we'll leave that for later because that's not important. Actually, here it is. UI, no. Oh, there it is. Button, that's changed. Okay, that's different. So here's our button. Now we want it to be in the middle somewhere. So let's just go and put it in the middle somewhere. So this is going to be a play button. We will put this in the middle. And then let's just increase the size to 200 by 200. So it's going to be a square button. Actually, that's a bit too big. 150 by 150. We'll change it later on. But for now, we will just... Actually, you know what? Let's just go do this now quickly. Let's open up Photoshop. And then we can create a button that is 150 by 150. New file. So let's say 150 by 150. And then all it's going to be is a simple triangle. Just like that. We'll get rid of the background. Then we will get rid of the stroke because we don't want any stroke. And then we can go and put some color to it. Let's carry on with the theme of the game. So something like that. I don't know if that works, but then let's rotate that 90 degrees. And then I just kind of want to make it... Actually, we'll leave it like that. I mean, it's not the best, but let's now go and export that into our file. So export as a PNG. We can put this in... Where is it? Game development, geometry dash, game, assets, art. and then we'll create a folder called UI, and this is going to be called play. Okay, so that should do it for our play button. So now we can go and replace this with play. So it's not the best, but it's going to work. And then let's just go and get rid of our text on it because we don't need that. Okay, so now we need to go and let's just see if this works. So can we press this button? Okay, so we can press it. Now let's go and code this. So we are going to need a UI manager in our scene. So let's go and say UI manager, and then we need to add a script onto this, and that's going to be a UI manager. So let's create that script. So we will drag this into our script folder and then open that up here. So this is going to have a reference to a button. So this is going to, we need to import that, I guess, using Unity .ui. What is this going to be? This is going to be a, I can't remember what it is. It's going to be a button, I guess. Button, just like that. So button, play button, just like that. And then we can create, we don't need our update method, I don't even think we need our start method. We'll get rid of that. And then all we want in here is a public void play game, like that. And then here we can say if global.is paused. Actually, do you want to say is paused? But before we do that, let's go and create another script in our scripts folder here, and we'll call this global. And then in here, let's get rid of all of this. So here we're just gonna put our references to variables that we need to access throughout the game. I don't actually know if this is the best way to do this, but this is how I'm going to do it. So this is going to be a public static boolean is, what are we going to call this? We'll just say play mode is equal to false, because we want the game to start when it is not playing. So play mode is equal to false, and then in our UI manager we can go and say if global.play mode. So if we are if global.play mode, so if we are playing the game, then we can go and get rid of that button. So here we can go and say play button dot set game object dot set active is going to be equal to false. Why have we got two brackets? I don't understand why that does that. And then if we are not in play mode, else we can go and say global.play mode is going to be equal to true. Hang on, this is not going to work. What am I doing? This is the function that we're going to press. So when we press this button, okay, I'm doing this wrong. If this is equal to false, then we need to go and say global.play mode is equal to true. That's all we have to do in here. And then in our player class here, rather than doing it where we were, here we need to go and say if the global.play mode is equal to true. So if that's true, then we can do this. Else, just don't do anything. So let's go and see if that works. Hopefully that does work, because I'm kind of confused. let's see, play mode. So our player should not be moving. Now, if I press that, where is our player? Oh, we haven't set it up. We haven't linked them. What am I doing? So play button. Let's go and add on click here. So this is going to have our UI manager. And then we need to select our play game. Now that should work. So we saw that our player was not moving. So if we press this, you can see now our player moves. But now we need to go and set that to be false. So UI manager, play mode is equal to true. And then we can go and say play button dot game object dot set active false. And then again, double brackets. Why? Like, why do you need that? That's one thing that's annoying about this editor. But it's not the end of the world. Okay, so let's try this out. So if we press play, we should be able to start the game, and then this button should disappear, which it doesn't. Object reference not set to an instance of the object line. Oh, we haven't dragged that in. So let's see, UI manager, we need to drag this into there. So now that button should disappear. So press it, and then here we go. We have our game to play. So now let's go and work on the jumping of the player. So I'm just going to leave that there just in case we need to add different global variables. So in our player class, here we need to start working on the jumping. So we can go and create another method called private. We'll keep it as private now because I don't think we need to access it anywhere else. So private void jump. And then in here, all we have to do is go and check for an input. So we're going to get our input from our spacebar. So here, let's go and say if the input dot get key, what is it? Get key down. And then we're going to look for a key code of space. So space. Again, double brackets. Why do we need double brackets? I don't understand. Maybe there's some kind of setting. I hope there is. If you're using this editor and there is some kind of setting that you can change to this, please let me know down in the comments because this is very annoying. So we are going to need our rigid body. So let's go and say serialized field. So serialized field rigid body 2D. So this is just going to be a rigid body just like that. What's wrong here? So rigid body, and then in here we can go and say rigid body 2D dot velocity is going to be equal to, so we're going to add some force in the upwards direction. So this is going to be a vector 2. This is going to be rigid body dot, what am I doing? Rigid body 2D dot velocity dot x, and then in the upwards direction we want it to be jump force that we're going to create. So let's go and say jump force, and then up here let's just copy this, and then we'll change this to jump force, and then we'll create, I think I've set these up as I think they look good, so we'll set that to 13, and then if you need to do it differently in your game, just set it how you want it. So this needs to be new, and then that should be fine. So let's go and test this out. So actually that's not going to work because we haven't called it in our method. So we're going to have to put this here so that we can only jump if we are in play mode. So let's just go and say jump. So that should be fine. We'll save that. And because it's in the update method, it should detect, or it should be looking at every frame to see if you have pressed the jump button, which is the spacebar. So now if we press, what? We haven't assigned our rigid body. So let's go to our player. So we have a rigid body, so let's drag that into there, and then that should be fine. So to get the best look of, so hold on. So to get the best look of the jumping, so let's just pause our movement quickly. So if we pause that, just comment that out, we should now be able to see how well our jumping works for our player. So let's bring this in here. So here you can see that if I press the spacebar, you can't really see that I'm pressing, but I'm pressing it. So if we press the spacebar, nothing happens until we press that button. So we can press space now, and we can see that we can jump. Now I have my rigid body on my player set up to a mass of 1 and a gravity scale of 4, just so that it gives it a kind of a very similar look to what the actual Geometry Dash game looks like. So if we go and comment this out, I don't know if we can do this. So let's see. Does that compile and then should that move? Nope. So let's try that again. Okay, so here's our player. So you can see that it kind of looks good. Now, because our camera is not following our player, we can't really see it for a long time. So let's go and work on our camera. So we'll come back to that and deal with the movement of the player and the jumping if we need to change it, depending on what it looks like when our camera is following it. So let's go and create a new camera script. And then we can attach this to our camera. Let's just drag that onto there, if it works. Drag that onto there. Let's go and edit that. So here's our camera script. Now, we're gonna have to do a few things in here. So what we want is we want a target, which is going to be our player, this guy over here. The next thing we want to do is we want to set a condition. So when our player gets to the middle of the screen, which I think is going to be at an X position of 0, only then we can go and trigger the camera to start following it. So not only that, but then we're also going to want an offset, because if we set the position of our camera to be the position of the player, which is what we're going to do because we want the camera to follow the player, we're going to have to introduce an offset to the camera so that you can actually see it. Because if you put the camera, or if you set the two positions together, they're just going to be on top of each other and then you won't be able to see anything. So we're going to have to set a slight offset to the camera on the Z-axis so that we can actually see what's in front of it. Because if we go to, let me demonstrate here. So if we go to our camera here, what am I doing? As soon as how do we move around? Actually, you know what? Let's just code the game and then I'll show you, because I forgot how to move around in Unity. But what I'm trying to say is this camera, as soon as we set the positions to each other, this camera is going to move straight onto our player, and then it's going to be as if the camera is on the other side of the player. And then you won't be able to see anything. So that's not what we want. So let's go and start doing this. So we're going to need a few things here. The first one is going to be a target. So let's go and say serialized field. This is going to be a transform because it's going to be our player target. Then the next one is going to be a smooth speed. So private, this is just going to private float. Smooth speed. So this is going to ensure that our camera moves along with our player smoothly, so you can't really see the movement of the camera that it's going to follow. So it's going to be set to 0.125, and because it's a float, we need F. So that's just underlined because we haven't used it yet. The next thing we're going to need is we are going to need a vector 3 for our offset. So this is where I was talking about we're going to need to offset our player camera so that we can see it, because if we don't, you'll see just now. Let's see, private vector. Actually, we might not need this because we can probably just do it in the inspector. So let's do this. Actually, yeah, you know what, let's leave it out, and then if it doesn't work by us just updating it in the inspector, then we can come back to it. So let's for now, let's go and say, let's go and add our condition so that when we get to a certain point in the middle of the screen, the camera can then go and start following our player. So this is going to be a private float. Start. It's going to be called start following X position. So when we get to this, which is going to be set to 0 because that is the middle of the screen, so we want the camera to stay where it is. which I believe is at 0. So as soon as the player gets to the middle of the camera, which is going to be at 0, because I believe the camera position is taken at the middle of it, so 0 would be over here somewhere. So as soon as the player gets to a position of 0, which is going to be right there, then only then the camera should start following our player. So let's see what we want to do. So now we need to go and say, first of all, we need to create another private. This time this is going to be a boolean, and this is going to be is following, and that's going to be set to false because we don't want the camera to follow our player at the very beginning. So as soon as it reaches that position, we will then go and say is following is equal to true, and then it's going to start following the player. So, and also my camera is gone. Actually, it's back. Okay, so let's see. So in our method, so we don't need our start method. We can go and do this in our update method. So we might need to change this to a late update or fixed update later, but we'll see if this works. So in here, let's go and say if we're not following, so not is following. That doesn't really make sense, but it makes sense for the code. So if we're not following and we don't have a target, so our player is equal to null, then what are we doing? Actually, I don't think we need to do this. Let's skip the step and then let's see if, because we will, in our case for this game, we will always have a player attached to our transform over here, so we don't need to check to see if it's null. And the is following is always going to be set to false unless our player gets to the correct location. So actually we will need to do that because we need to set the is following to true when our player reaches that position. So we need to go and say if, let's just bring that back so we don't have to retype it. If is not following and is equal to null, that needs to be not equal to null, so we do have a player. Then we can go and say if the player dot position dot x is greater than or equal to the the starting follow position, then we can go and say is following is going to be equal to true. So now our camera can go and start following our player. Okay, so that's fine. So now we need to make it so that our camera actually does follow. So now that we have set is following is equal to true, if this meets the right, if this is true, all of here, then we can go and say if is following, so if is following is true, which in this case it should be, and the target, which is our player, is not equal to false, not equal to null, so we do have a player, which in our case we will, but we'll just add the check just in case. Then we can go and say for desired, we need to create a desired position and a smooth position, and then we will tell our player to move to that smooth position. So let's go and say var desired position is going to be equal to a target, not target, player. What I keep thinking, player is our target, so we've named it player. So it's going to be player dot position, which is fine. And then we need another var smoothed smooth position, and that is going to be equal to vector 3 dot lerp. So we wanted to lerp from our current position to our desired position. Where is it? There we go. And then we wanted to do that with a smooth speed of 0.125f, so that should be fine. The next thing we want to do is what do we want to do? Let's see, what have I written down here? We also want to actually, you know what, before we do that, let's just go and see if this movement actually works. So let's go and say transform dot position is now going to be equal to our smoothed position. So let's save that, and then let's jump back into our game and see, do we need to transform? Yeah, we need to drag in our player. So let's go and do that. So on our camera, we have a script here. So let's go and drag in our player so we know what we're following. And now let's press play and hope that we see some movement. Okay, so you can now see our camera has moved to our player. So this is where I was talking about the offset. So you can see that now if we go into our 3D mode here, you can see that our player, well, our camera rather, is right on top of our player and we can't see it. So we kind of need to move our player out this way and add some kind of offset to it. Let's just pause this so that when we move our camera this way, we can actually see what's in our game. So to do that, let's just set this to -1 on our camera, but we're gonna have to do that in in our when we're not in gameplay mode. So let's test this out and see. Does that go back to where it was? Okay, so it does. So we're gonna have to add that offset into our code over here. So let's see, where is our offset? So let's add a private, or what is it? Public. It's going to be a vector3 offset, and then we'll set that in our in our inspector. So our desired position is going to be our player.position plus the offset that we're going to set up. So that should add that offset into our camera's position, and then we can just move from our current position to that desired position. So let's go and test this out. So we will have to, I think, set this to, let's test this out. Let's press play and then we can set it up. So let's just go and put our offset as -1, and then that should be fine. So if we go and set this to -1, hopefully we'll save that. If we press play, we should see our what's in our game. So we do. Okay, so that's fine. Now what I was talking about, so let's just see if this works. So if we press our play button, we should see that we now follow our player. So if I zoom out here, you can see that our camera is following our player, which is what we want. And if we press jump, you can see that our camera still follows our player, which is what we want. But the thing we don't want is we don't want our camera to move up and down. So you can see that because we jump up and down, our camera is moving. We always want the game to look like this, where then we have the ground on the bottom and the player just jumping up and down. So we need to go and do that over here. So instead of saying move our player to our smooth position, we need to create another position here, and this is going to be a var. This is going to be, let's call this our freeze. What's it going to be? It's going to be, we're going to freeze it on the y-axis, so freeze y position, and this is just going to be equal to a new vector3. And the only thing we're going to do in here is we are going to keep our smooth position for our x-axis. So we'll put this in here, smooth position.x, and then we want to keep everything else the same. So that is going to be transform.position. Which one comes first? .y. And then the same thing, transform.position.z, because we want it to keep that offset that we already have. So we'll save that, and then in here, instead of saying transform.position is equal to our smooth position, we can go and say our freeze y position, and that should fix our movement on the y-axis. So we should now see that if we press play, our camera and our player stay there, and as soon as we press play, we can see that we can now jump and our camera stays at the right level. But there's one problem here. We don't want our player to start over there. We want our player to start off screen, because we don't really have to, but in the actual game itself, I saw that the player actually starts moving from off screen, and then as soon as it reaches this position, the camera then starts following it. So let's go and test this out and see if it works. So our player shouldn't move. as soon as we press play, you should see our camera start following it. So that's perfect. That's exactly what we wanted. Yeah, so that's perfect. We can save that. And that is going to be it for today's episode. So thanks for watching. In the next episode, we'll probably start working on some of the obstructions and the obstacles that we have to go over. So like adding in those triangles, probably some squares as well. And actually, the next episode is probably purely going to be based on making that stuff in Photoshop. So if you're interested in that, please go ahead and subscribe using this button over here. And then, yeah, I'll put a link to the other first episode, which wasn't that great, over here somewhere. But yeah, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and I will see you guys in tomorrow's episode. So thanks for watching, and goodbye.